Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiriduluale, the headlines. Reports claim 440 bodies found in unmarked graves in Izium, Ukraine. White House announces $600 million additional security package for Ukraine during ongoing counteroffensive. And Russia and China launch joint Pacific patrol, the second joint drills near Japan, featuring 7 Russian and Chinese naval vessels. We begin with the grim news that Ukrainian authorities say they have found a mass grave in the recaptured city of Izium, and this is according to President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was speaking during his nightly video address, adding that more information should be available shortly. A regional police official confirmed that more than 440 bodies had indeed been found and that some of the people had been killed by shelling and airstrikes. President Zelensky put the blame squarely on Russia and likened the discovery to what happened in Bucha on the outskirts of the capital, Kiev, in the early stages of the late February invasion by Russian forces. While Ukraine and its Western allies have accused the Russian forces of perpetrating war crimes there, Russia has repeatedly denied it targets civilians who has committed war crimes.
Ізюмі на Харківщині знайдене масове захоронення людей.
Mass graves were found in Izium in the Kharkiv region. The necessary legal proceedings have already been initiated there. There should be more information, clear and verified, tomorrow. Tomorrow, there will be Ukrainian and international journalists in Izium. We want the world to know what is really happening and what the Russian occupation has led to in Bucha, in Mariupol, now, unfortunately, Izium. Russia is leaving death behind it everywhere and must be held responsible. The world must bring Russia to real responsibility for this war. We will do everything for this. The terrorist state has already launched more than 3,800 different missiles against us. But no missile will bring Russia closer to its goal. There will be no subjugation of Ukraine. And each missile brings Russia closer to greater international isolation, greater economic degradation, and even clearer historical condemnation. In response, we must show that there will always be a tough and principled reaction to every manifestation of Russian terror. That is why the 8th EU sanction package is needed. We talked about it with Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, a principled decision by the United States of America regarding the approach to the terrorist state is needed. Legal recognition of the status. By the way, we discussed this recently during the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, to Kyiv. We also discussed this issue during contact with the members of the U.S. Congress. Progress is needed in providing Ukraine with air defense system. We already have agreements with certain countries. Our diplomats are working with others. I want to emphasize that without providing us with a sufficient number of effective defense systems that protect the Ukrainian sky, Russia will continue to feel impunity and provoke new local and global crises. Therefore, protecting Ukraine from Russian missiles is indeed a basic global security element.
And just as President Zelensky was speaking, there was another comment, this time coming from the European Commission leader, who said supporting Ukraine comes at a high cost, but freedom is priceless. The chief, Ursula von der Leyen, while she was addressing soaring inflation and high energy prices in Europe, in Kiev, reiterated that the bloc would be unwavering in its backing of Ukraine as cracks start to appear among member states in how to further punish Russia for the invasion of its neighbor. When asked about further EU help to bolster the counter-offensive, Ms. von der Leyen gave no indication that the support would diminish. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden will personally meet with the families of Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan at the White House. This will be the first time he has met with them in person. The White House Press Secretary, Karen Jean-Pierre, says Mr. Biden will meet with Ms. Griner's wife and Whelan's sister to assure them his administration is committed to securing the release of their loved ones and that they remain front of mind. Mr. Biden will meet with them separately, and that's according to an official. According to her, one of the things that the president wanted to make clear is and one of the reasons he's meeting with the families is that he wanted them to know that they remain front of mind and that his team is working on this every day, on making sure that Brittany and Paul Whelan return home safely. The Biden administration has repeatedly said that working to secure the releases, as well as those of Americans wrongfully detained abroad, is a top priority. In late July, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that the United States had put forward a, quote, substantial proposal to try to secure the release of both Ms. Griner and Mr. Whelan. The White House has also announced an additional $600 million security package for Ukraine, providing the Ukrainian military with another round of assistance during its counteroffensive against Russian forces. According to a statement from Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the equipment will be drawn from existing U.S. stocks and inventories and will include additional arms, ammunition, and equipment. The package includes additional ammunition for the HIMARS system, which Ukraine has used to hit multiple Russian logistic hubs, command posts, and ammo depots. It also includes tens of thousands of conventional artillery rounds and counter-drone systems. With winter coming, the United States is also providing cold weather gear and more night vision devices. The Defense Ministry in Moscow says Russian and Chinese military vessels are taking part in a joint patrol in the Pacific Ocean for the second time within a year. 8 ships in total are taking part in the operation, which is intended to support peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific, monitor the sea lanes, and safeguard the maritime economic assets of the two countries. The Russian Defense Ministry said in a statement that the second joint patrol since October 2021 is part of a program of international military cooperation. The two navies will conduct joint tactical maneuvers, establish communications, and conduct a series of exercises from tactical gunnery to helicopter takeoffs and landings. While the Defense Ministry did not specify the area of operations for the joint patrol, in a video shared on a Telegram, Pacific Fleet Deputy Commander Alexander Bagdasarov mentions the Sea of Horrors north of Japan. The joint naval mission comes on the heels of Vostok 2022, the week-long war games in the Russian Far East, involving more than 50,000 troops from 13 countries. According to Major General Vladimir Omryanovich, the purpose of the event was to, quote, create a coalition force that would plan and implement a special military operation aimed at ensuring peace and security in the region. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says current attempts to push for a unipolar world have, quote, taken an absolutely ugly form lately, which the overwhelming majority of nations of the planet find unacceptable. The remark came as he met his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. Mr. Putin adds that Russia and China stand together for a just, democratic, multipolar world order based on international law and the central role of the UN, and not on some rules that somebody invented and then attempts to impose on others without even explaining what they are. According to him, the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden has been using the phrase rule-based world order to describe the way it prefers the world to operate. During the meeting, Mr. Putin thanked Mr. Xi for China's balanced stance on the crisis in Ukraine. China has criticized Russia for having attacked the country, but blames the United States for triggering the escalation by its push to expand NATO. Mr. Putin also reiterated Russia's support of the One China policy and Beijing's claims of sovereignty over the island of Taiwan. The Chinese government has accused the U.S. of undermining its territorial integrity by increasingly treating Taipei as a separate nation rather than a self-governing part of China. Food insecurity has continued to spread in various parts of the world due to conflict and humanitarian issues. That's according to Coordinator Martin Griffiths, who has told the Security Council that farming will happen in Somalia. In South Sudan, Yemen, northeast Nigeria, and Ethiopia, a combined estimated 648,000 people face catastrophic levels of food insecurity. The World Food Program Executive Director David Beasley said since the Russian-Ukraine conflict began, soaring food, fuel, and fertilizer costs have driven an additional 70 million people closer to starvation. The International Monetary Fund has announced that it is aiming to operationalize the Resilience and Sustainability Trust around the 2022 annual meetings, which will take place from October the 10th to 16th in Washington in the United States. The fund is deploying all elements in its lending toolkit to support the membership at this time. The fund proposed a new food shock window under its emergency financing instruments. Its managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, had a conversation with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, where they discussed how the IMF could immediately be of help to Ukraine. They also discussed how they could deploy the food shock window, provided the IMF board approves it, and what it could be in terms of potentially a timeline for it. Pope Francis says it is morally legitimate for nations to supply weapons to Ukraine to help the country defend itself from Russian aggression. Speaking to reporters while he was returning from a 3-day trip to Kazakhstan, the Pope also asked Kiev to be open to eventual dialogue, even though it may, quote, stink, because it will be difficult for the Ukrainian side. The war in Ukraine, which Russia invaded on February the 24th, provided the backdrop to the Pope's visit to Kazakhstan, where he attended a congress of religious leaders from around the world.
Ma può essere immorale se si fa con l'intenzione di provocare più guerra o
Russia's foreign ministry has said that if the United States decides to supply Kiev with longer-range missiles for the U.S.-made HIMARS system in use by Ukraine, it would cross, quote, a red line and become a party to the conflict. In a briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova added that Russia reserves the right to defend its territory. She says that Russia has repeatedly stated that pumping Ukraine with Western weapons leads to a prolongation of hostilities and new casualties among the civilian population. She also adds that if Washington decides to supply longer-range missiles to Kiev, it will cross a red line and become a party to the conflict, which Russia reserves the right to defend its territory by all means available to it. Still to come on the program, the United States targets banks using Russian payment systems. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Let's talk now to Dr. Olena Stinkaya, expert at the Center for Global Strategy Studies in Ukraine. But she joins us virtually this morning from Florence in Italy. Good morning to you, Dr. Stinkaya. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
Let's look at some of the things that have happened. The discovery of these mass graves just a couple of days after the area was recovered by Ukrainian forces, talking specifically about Izium. Now, this, for those who had been watching, would probably not come as too much of a surprise, but proving that the Russians did it is a different ball game entirely, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why Ukraine is really open and invites journalists and international organizations to work in the field and to investigate, to come and see and to investigate these crimes themselves. So Ukraine opens this territory for international organizations who are responsible for such cases, for investigation of such cases. For example, Amnesty International was freely working in Bucha and Irpin, and they collected a lot of evidences and a lot of interviews of people, and they documented all these things. So the same will be in Izium. Ukraine doesn't do it by itself. Of course, we make investigations and we have this internal procedures, but we are open for international society to come and see it. So here is like this transparency is very important, and only through this transparency the truth can be seen and can be achieved.
The other side of all of this is that the fact that Ukraine is now on the counter-offensive, for people like you who are Ukrainians but are outside of Ukraine at the moment, how does this come to you, considering that you are in Italy, which is some distance from the theater of war at this point?
Yeah, I left Ukraine as a refugee, and I found a job in Italy now after 5 months being as a refugee in Europe. But my family is in Ukraine. My husband is in Ukraine. He's in territorial defense forces, and so that's how comes it to me. That's my personal tragedy. Also, this war, because speaking about my personal experience, it's like the worst day of my life that started on the 24th of February and it doesn't end yet. And the counteroffensive operation of Ukrainian forces gives all of us force to live further and to fight for our future. But still, it's we all want this war to end as soon as possible, and we hope that we will regain our territories as soon as possible, so that those atrocities that Russians committed on the occupied lands will never happen again.
One would sincerely hope that your husband, who, as you said, is in the territorial forces, continues to remain safe even as this continues to happen. The other question, of course, is that you are in Italy, and you said that you did leave Ukraine for there as a refugee. So that brings me to the issue of refugees. As the war went on or has gone on, the attention has shifted away from people like yourselves who have had to flee the fighting, especially outside the country, to other places. And we've spoken to quite a number of people like that on this program. So I'm going to ask you what I asked them. What was the experience like? Even though it's quite a while now that you left, but you pointed out that you were a refugee for quite a while before you secured this job in Florence. What was that experience like?
I was lucky enough. First, as you asked about my personal experience, I left Ukraine on the first day of war because we live in Irpin, which is very close to Hostomel, and the war started from Hostomel as well. So we woke up in the morning, at night actually, because of bombs. And we decided to leave to the western Ukraine first, because of children. And that was very probably the smartest decision of our life, because the next few days the place where we lived was occupied by Russians and the atrocities started, the killings started. And after the air alarms also came to Western Ukraine, we made a hard decision that me and children, I with children, we leave Ukraine and go to Western Europe. And I was lucky enough. I was maybe more lucky than the other Ukrainian refugees, because I was invited by my friend to Amsterdam. So I spent at her house 5 months living there. She accepted me with my kids and with my pets, and she gave me this necessary time for survival and for healing and for recovery. And during this time, I managed to find a job here, so I'm independent now. And my kids went to school in Amsterdam, and the society was very friendly, and yeah, they accepted us very cordially. So it wasn't easy, though, but because it's all about trauma and personal trauma and feeling that you cannot control situation, that you cannot decide for your future, that you have only one day plan and maybe you don't have future. That's terrible, actually, and many people go frustrated and go in depression. So it's really it's with all refugees, all other refugees. But yeah, with me, it maybe was a bit better than with others. But generally, Ukrainians are very grateful for such acceptance and for such help as they meet everywhere in European countries and in the world also, not only in Europe. So thank you. I mean, for all those people.
If you're not, if you are not directly in the line of fire, your husband is. So my next question has to do with the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, which has been the subject of quite a bit of talks and issues and visits and criticisms and mutual accusations. One is wondering how far is the information that you have taking you in terms of the safety of the family that you do have back in Ukraine? And as an expert in global strategy studies, what do you think should happen in the case of that power plant, which is Europe's largest?
Well, yeah, it's a difficult question because here we also come back to the rationality of the foreign policy of political actions. We come to the interest of those actors who make political decisions. Let me also come back a bit to the beginning of war. Before war, there were a lot of discussions and there were a lot of people, political scientists, experts, who didn't believe that Russia would dare to start the full-scale conflict. And later on they said, oh, we were mistaken, we don't know, we still don't know and don't understand why they did it. So here I wouldn't deny any decision from Russian side, even the worst one. So we have to be prepared for the worst, because Russia is already using. If we were waiting, if we all have been waiting for the use of nuclear weapon in this war. So here it is. It's not a nuclear missile, but it's a nuclear power plant, the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. And if it explodes and the wind goes, for example, south or southeast or southwest, then even if it goes southwest, it can come to Africa, for example. So it can cover, it can destroy enormous territory of people where people are living. So it's not only about Ukraine, but it's about terrorizing. That Russia is terrorizing the whole big region, European region, and also North Africa region, and well, in the Middle East also, because it can also reach. It depends on the wind, because when Chernobyl exploded, the wind was northwest, and Finland and Sweden and Norway also fixed the high level of radiation on their territories. So it depends on the weather very much. Of course, so we cannot as I said already, we cannot deny any scenario here, because Russia is unpredictable now. The only thing that we can do is continue pushing and stop the terror state where it is and make Russia step back. Because Moscow was constantly was trying to convince everyone that Moscow and Russians respect only power. So no dialogue, no negotiations, no peace agreement, but only power. So only power can stop them. And yeah, here we need. Well, Ukraine needs more weapons, of course, and here we have to create such situations for Russians that they just have the one way to retreat, and that's it.
Finally, before I let you go, my final question, of course, will be the possibility of peace. Every Ukrainian I've spoken to wants peace restored. Those who are outside Ukraine want to return home and to their families and to their homes. But they also say that that will not be at any price. They will not support their government or their military securing that peace at any price. Is that also your position?
Of course, because if here, here also in Italy, what I'm doing now, I continue to work on Russian foreign policy as a Russian foreign policy expert and an expert on Russian narratives. So I continue my work on Russian narratives, historical narratives and political narratives. And from narratives, they build their strategy and they base their strategy on narratives. And looking back and looking what they're doing now and looking what they're telling and what they're doing to their society now, we see their primary goal, their only goal. They have no other options. They do not see no other options to negotiate and to co-live in peace and security, to cooperate. They see the only options for Ukraine, that Ukraine is to be eliminated. So for us, any middle peace agreement with Russia now means that after some time they will reorganize, they will gather more power, and they will attack again. And next time, we don't know what will happen next time, because we saw it already in the past. We saw it with Chechnya. Chechen war continued for 10 years. And there were two Chechen wars. At the first one, Chechen people won. They defeated Russian army. But at the second Chechen war, Russia defeated Ichkeria. And now what happened there? The same what is happening now in Ukraine. Atrocities, war crimes, killing people, mass graves. But nobody investigated that because it was proclaimed as Russian territory. So people were forgotten. And Chechnya now is a territory of Russia. And we see everything what happens there. It's a terror state. So Russia is to be defeated now. And this is the matter of our existence, future existence, and this is also a matter of the existence of other Eastern European countries, because our neighbors and our friends, such as Baltic states and Poland and other states, they do know what Russia is wants to do and what Russia's primary goal is. So that's why they support us so strongly, because they know that if we fail, then they will be the next. The war will be in their countries.
Certainly no one expects and no one wants or will want this particular situation to go on for 10 years, like the example you gave in Chechnya. But Dr. Olena Snegar, thank you for your time this morning. Please continue to stay safe out there in Florence, Italy. Dr. Snegar is at the Center for Global Studies Strategy Ukraine, but she is in Italy at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said that pipeline exports of ammonia, a crucial component of fertilizer, had been blocked by Ukraine. At a briefing, the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, said that there were, quote, no obstacles to ammonia exports from the Russian side, but that, quote, if everybody in the West is so concerned about supplies of agricultural products and we as adults understand that in order to achieve a harvest next year, fertilizers need to be supplied at least this year, then let those curators of the Kiev regime make their people in the administration of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky fulfill that part of the grain deal and unblock ammonia export opportunities. And the U.S. Treasury Department has announced that it is ready to impose sanctions on any institution outside Russia using the country's payment system. According to its press release, financial institutions that enter into new or expanded agreements with the National Payment Card System, NSPK, risk supporting Russia's efforts to evade U.S. sanctions through the expanded use of the MIR National Payment System outside the territory of the Russian Federation. The Treasury also announced sanctions on the chairman and the management board of this NSPK, Vladimir Komlev, and others. Earlier, the United States threatened to impose sanctions on foreign banks, in particular Turkish financial institutions, for working with the MRI system. Since the introduction of the new payment system, Russian banks have issued more than 129 million MIR cards. And so let's talk to Ini Junmakwa, who I'm not too sure has an MIR card. I'll be finding that out. But welcome, Ini, and nice to have you with us. Germany is taking control of 3 Russian-owned oil refineries. Yeah. Why?
So you know that they had Russia and Germany. They both own a part of Gazprom.
Right.
And so when the war started, Russia gave up their own part, the part they were and said, okay, you guys take it over and run it, because of, obviously they don't want to have something. So part of that is that they also have oil refineries that are being owned or run by Rosneft.
Rosneft, yes.
Rosneft, yeah. So, and it's also partly owned. You know, of course, they get their crude from Russia.
Right.
You know, but they are refining in Germany. All right, so now we know that they're preparing to wean themselves off both oil and gas and all of that. So Germany is preparing itself now because it's actually a temptation for them because they get 90% of their crude from Russia. So that means that if they cut off this relationship, taking control of these refineries, 3 of them, that means they might be stuck because where are they going to get crude from? You know, that are going to refine for use for the economic activities and all of that. But it seems that since Russia has decided to continue with the maintenance of the Nord Stream 1, and so they don't have gas, they might as well prepare themselves, you know, ahead of the end of the year when they're supposed to totally wean themselves of oil, Russian oil. So that's why Germany is taking over this. And they're thinking of giving control, at least the operations, to Shell.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Because Shell has, I think, about 37%. ENI has a smaller percentage there. But none of these companies actually are now ready to actually take over the running of that. So Germany says it's still looking for solution, a permanent solution. But for now, it seems like Shell might be taking care of the day-to-day operations
in
of
the
that.
interim.
Even though getting the crude is...
yeah, because I was waiting when all this explanation, that part of it was not there.
Getting the crude is not there, but Nigeria has crude, so...
Yeah, let's hope that comes into the consideration. Now, Russia is to subsidize ship leasing program. There is something to be said about this ship leasing. We had talked about the fact that, of course, outright purchase is impossible, maintenance of ships is impossible, but now there's the question of leasing. And Russia wants to subsidize that.
And so we've always talked about how Russia seems to be adapting fast. And I think somebody noted a conversation I had before now that, well, Russia started the war, so most likely they had some things put in place, you know, knowing that some of these consequences will follow the war. So perhaps they had it. But we've talked about how they've been cut off the aviation sector and getting the parts that they need for maintenance and how they're trying to deal with that. We've talked about the domestic ladder V that are coming to transport. So now they're also going into ship, and they're keeping 15 billion rubles for this ship leasing program, and they hope that by 2030 they'll be able to build about 300 ships.
Wow.
So yes.
That's a lot of ships.
Yeah, so they're dealing with components now, because obviously with the sanctions they're not able to get those things
From
in.
outside, yeah.
Exactly. So they're working on how to create those things back home in Russia, and then they're looking at the bigger picture of, with this money, they have a major ship maker there.
Right.
They've already given him subsidy and all of that to encourage him, to build ships and build the component. But they hope that by 2030, which is I think 8 years from now,
Yes, indeed.
building ships.
Wow. Long-term
And
plan.
I think what your last guest said, with Russia, you never can tell.
Indeed.
Yeah, you can't really predict them. So
This falls in line with that narrative. Now, what's going on with the issue of Moldova and flights to Russia?
Yeah, so a lot of Moldovians live in Russia. So, and Moldova is very close to Ukraine. They are
Right.
neighbors.
Right.
But they have a breakaway region that they call Transnistria.
Yes.
Okay. And that place has been like a camping place for the Russian army, because it's a breakaway region.
Yes.
So they're able to do all that, even though Moldova is a pro-Western country.
Right.
So recently, Moldova has come to say, Russia, we don't need you guys this close to us. Please take your things away. And you can imagine the tension that has built up from there. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, Moldovians are saying, because I think they like going there a lot, they have a lot of them residing in Russia, and there are no flights, obviously because of the sanctions. And also, even when they want to take flights, they have to go a longer route, to travel from Moldova out.
Yes, out and then
back
before
in.
coming back.
So Moldovians are complaining and saying they would like for there to be resumption of flights. And they were actually about to do that, I think on the 9th of September. The aviation sector wanted to open up the skies again because of the number of Moldovians that are residents in
Russia. Right.
And a lot of them have tickets that they bought before the pandemic.
Which they still want to use.
Exactly, because when it comes to holidays for the Western people, they plan long term.
Way ahead.
Exactly. So they have those tickets which they have not used. So they put a lot of pressure on the aviation sector to say open up. But I mean, with the issue of Transnistria and all of that,
the tension might make that a bit difficult and not too safe.
It has. So they have said there's no way they're opening the skies, and so I mean, they might have to wait a little bit longer. Indeed.
Thank you, Ini. Of course, as always, Ini will have details of the other business news, not just about Russia, but about other places in the world and how they impact your pocket and possibly mine. Thank you, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come on the program, Martha jumps joyfully as she meets her mayor's son in retaking Ukrainian village of Kosacha. Please stay on with us. Time for the sports news. Out of this conflict, Ukrainian midfielder Alexander Zinchenko has been ruled out of the national team squad ahead of the UEFA Nations League opener next week. Zinchenko, who joined Arsenal this season from Manchester City, suffered a calf muscle injury during training at the club, which will require about 2 weeks for treatment and recovery. The Ukrainian national team will begin training sessions later on today in Warsaw, Poland, in preparation for their opening game against Scotland on Wednesday, September the 21st. Ukraine are in Group 1 in League B alongside Ireland and Armenia. And former Ukrainian heavyweight boxing champion Vladimir Klitschko says if Ukraine fell to Russia, the rest of Europe would soon follow. Mr. Klitschko made the statement when he accepted the M100 Media Award on behalf of the Ukrainian people in Potsdam, Germany. According to the organizers of the award, Ukraine was given the award due to its fortitude against the Russian invasion and the defense of freedom and sovereignty. Mr. Klitschko also called for more weapons deliveries for Ukraine before the ceremony, as a war-torn nation has been putting pressure on Germany to increase its weapons deliveries in the past 2 weeks. Former United States diplomat Bill Richardson has traveled to Russia to secure the release of a two-time Olympic champion, Brittany Griner. The former New Mexico governor and his team held meetings in Moscow this week with Russia's leadership over the basketball star and ex-U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. Both imprisoned Americans, who the U.S. State Department classifies as wrongfully detained, have been reported to be at the center of a potential prisoner exchange between Russia and the United States. However, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the trip was not coordinated with the U.S. government. Ms. Griner traveled to Russia to play for UMMC Ekaterinburg during the WNBA off-season and was arrested on February the 17th on drug possession charges after she entered Russia with vape canisters containing cannabis oil and was sentenced to a 9-year prison term last month.
Цветок расцвел. Я думала, что закончится цветок зацветет.
Finally, on the program, a Ukrainian mother wept and jumped joyfully as her mayor's son came to pick her up from her house after 6 months of Russian occupation. Jumping and whipping as she saw her son's car approaching, the mother of Derhachi district mayor Vyacheslav Zadorenko told her son she knew he would return for her. As Zadorenko and his mother reunited in a recaptured village near the Russian border as Russian forces retreated from parts of the Kharkiv region. The mother insisted on feeding her son and his armed escorts with borщ, a staple dish in every Ukrainian household. But Mr. Zadorenko insisted that his parents must leave the house for a safer place. He had gone to see his mother in the village of Sosacha Lopen. Told his mother in his video that he arrived to the retaken village before Ukrainian officials did, and he needed to see his family. Story with a good ending. Thanks for being with us on this Friday. That's been our program this morning. My name is Ladi Akiri Dulale. There's an update at 5 o'clock on The World Today. You have yourselves a pleasant weekend ahead. Good morning.